A Colorado substitute teacher put behind bars for sexually assaulting a student in a borrowed car. Last week, authorities arrested 20-year-old Shelby Clarke for sexual assault on a child by one in a position of trust. The allegations were reported to the Crowley County Sheriff's Office in late April, after the superintendent told the sheriff's office he was concerned a substitute teacher was involved in sexual relationships with male students. According to authorities, one student told deputies he had sex with Clarke 2 different times in a borrowed red Mazda SUV. The student told officials the disturbing incidents happened once before an extracurricular practice and once when she picked up the student from his house. The high schooler reportedly said both sexual encounters happened inside a Mazda CX-7 that turned out not to be hers. According to KRDO, the owner of the vehicle lent Clarke his car because he was an old friend of her mom's and wanted to help the 20-year-old when her car broke down. Clarke drove the vehicle for the past month, but about 2 weeks ago, Clarke called the car's owner, saying investigators were impounding the car. The owner of the Mazda was reportedly horrified and disgusted by what happened in his car.
We know that she allegedly borrowed a car from a friend. From the friend's perspective, he thought he was simply helping her out because her car broke down. He certainly didn't think that his car would end up being impounded because of allegations of this type of criminal behavior. I think once again, when we talk about the investigation, we know the car was impounded. We know that they're going to be looking to see if there's any DNA, semen, any biological fluid that can be found in that car, because if there is, and it links to the two of them, she's in a whole lot of trouble. Look, I think this isn't the first time we're discussing this type of case, because it seems to be a common theme where we have a young, often female, either teacher or substitute teacher, alleged to have inappropriate relationships with students. And so, look, I always say that we haven't seen any evidence at this point, but it is disconcerting when we start to hear yet another teacher arrested for inappropriate behavior with students.
I spoke with Law&Crime legal analyst Julie Rendelman, who explained despite her young age, Clarke's alleged actions shouldn't be tolerated.
Her behavior was absolutely inappropriate and indicates that she is not someone that should be in the classroom, quite frankly, ever. Remember, she's young. She's 20 years old. That's not an excuse. But the individuals she was talking about are only a couple years younger than her. So unfortunately, it's incredibly inappropriate. She can never be in a classroom again. And I'll be frank, that's whether or not she is convicted of the crimes of which she's alleged. I think, unfortunately, there is a difference potentially with an older teacher being a little more involved with a young student in terms of if there's difficulties at home, that they become potentially more of a mentor. I think the line starts to blur when the ages of the adult, the supervisor, the teacher, the substitute teacher is so close in age with the student. I think there's an appearance of impropriety, whether there existed one or not, that when a 20-year-old teacher is picking up their 16-year-old student and driving them to various places, that people are going to look at it funny. I would assume also that the school would have frowned upon any of that behavior and kind of nixed it initially to prevent that from happening.
Then more disturbing details and allegations. According to reports, students were interviewed by authorities who told deputies Clarke sent them nude photos. CCSO reportedly also interviewed several female students who told deputies Clarke made inappropriate comments to them about the male students in the class, calling the young boys hot and saying she wanted to have sex with them.
I mean, look, this is someone who I left college when I was 21 years old. I certainly wasn't behaving that way. There is maybe some mitigation in terms of youth, but there's really no excuse in walking into a classroom and behaving that way. And remember, she's a substitute teacher, so they're probably not going to necessarily look at her the same as they would a teacher that's there every day. But she certainly is old enough to understand that her behavior, even in talking to the girls that way, was inappropriate and should not be tolerated at any school.
We need to take a really quick break from this shocking story. If you know us at Law&Crime, you know Morgan & Morgan is a proud sponsor of ours. And as viewers, sometimes our videos show the world isn't always safe. So if you're ever hurt, it can be confusing and scary, especially if you don't know where to turn. But we've got a little solution for you, because Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, can help. Most of us, including myself, always have our phones on us. And with just one click, you can submit a claim and your injury could be worth millions. And the world is moving so fast, we can find ourselves oftentimes so busy, but it only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case. Plus, if you're injured, you never want to feel alone. Fighting big companies takes a big law firm. So with America's largest injury law firm, they'll be ready to take on insurance companies of every size. And Morgan & Morgan doesn't settle for lowball offers. If you're injured, you can easily start by submitting a claim at www.forthepeople.com/LC News or by dialing #LAW, that's #529 on your phone. When the sheriff interviewed Clarke for her side of the story, she allegedly admitted to authorities she had an OnlyFans account where she posts sexual images and videos, but said the students shouldn't have access to them. Clarke denied having sex or any inappropriate relationships with students, but she admitted to the sheriff the previous weekend she was intoxicated and sent explicit photos to her husband, but didn't know how the students would have gotten a hold of them, adding she was married and had an 8-month-old child. In the days that followed, authorities interviewed a different substitute teacher who was a witness in the case. The second substitute teacher reportedly told deputies she engaged in a threesome with her boyfriend and Clarke. According to the report, the substitute told deputies there was heavy drinking involved, and Clarke allegedly took photos of the menage a trois without her consent. Authorities say the substitute teacher was featured in the sexually explicit photos alongside Clarke that were sent to students. And multiple students reported they received the photos of Clarke over Snapchat. So is it possible a student saw the photos on OnlyFans and then sent the pictures to more students online? Rendelman says that can only be answered after the investigation.
Remember, she also says she's an OnlyFans account, that somehow they may have gotten the pictures from that. It won't be difficult, Elizabeth, to determine whether or not she sent the photos or that they got it from some other means. This is what an investigation is for. And so if one of those kids has a photo and it shows that it was directly sent from her, then her explanation is out the window. It would not shock me if students found out that an attractive teacher was on an Instagram account, for example, or more specifically in this case, an OnlyFans account, that one or several of them might try to access it to see, I hate to say what it is they're missing. But again, we go back to the issue of, if there is proof that she used either her computer, her phone, or any type of technology to send these photos directly to the students, then any explanation of it being simply them downloading from OnlyFans, again, doesn't exist and doesn't hold water.
And while having an OnlyFans account isn't a crime, questions still linger on how students could have gotten a hold of the account if that was the case.
So I don't want to judge people who make money off of OnlyFans. And I think we're starting to see this more, not only in the schools with substitute teachers, but teachers. We see this, police officers, firemen. We start to hear other professions that are also doing OnlyFans in order to sometimes make ends meet. And I think a couple things about that. Look, the school can certainly initiate some type of rules when it comes to a teacher's behaviors outside of the classroom. The question becomes a couple things. One is, how did the students know about it, right? Did they know about it because the teacher told them and therefore it spread like wildfire, or because one of the kids was inappropriately on one of those websites? I think inherent with a teacher being involved in something like that where the kids find out about it, the kids are going to obviously be interested in looking at that, and they're going to look at their teacher differently. I think that's inevitable.
As the investigation is reportedly still active, it's unclear at this time if Clarke will face prison time, but she could be looking at being a registered sex offender if convicted. Shelby Clarke bonded out of jail last Friday. The Crowley County School District says she's no longer employed by the district. According to court records online, she's scheduled to appear back in court on June 11th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.